Alright, so we already looked at my favourite bikes that I rode last year in 2020, and there's a link to that video in the description in case you haven't seen it already. But what about 2021? The riding season is not too far off now, and there have been some incredible looking bikes announced over the last few months. So in a rough order of personal levels of anticipation, here are the 10 I'm looking forward to the most. But before we get started, if you're new here and you want to see the first rides and reviews of these bikes as soon as they go live, then please do make sure you hit subscribe. So there's nothing massively new about the Urban GS for 2021, but it's a bike I've been wanting to ride for ages, and in this new 40th anniversary paint job, I think it just looks absolutely spot on. BMW issued this black and yellow scheme across all of their GS models to celebrate 40 years since the original R80 GS, and although it looks decent on the more modern bikes like the 1250, I think that the R90 really suits it, and the specs and levels of tech are a lot closer to what you'd expect from a bike of 40 years in age. I really rated the standard R90 when I borrowed it last year, and it was that simplicity that was part of its appeal to me, so I can't see this being anything other than loads of fun to ride, and I reckon in this colour scheme, it's the best looking retro bike you can buy in 2021. Ducati made some huge changes to the Monster for the new model year, with a completely different aesthetic, and much to the dismay of some Ducati traditionalists, a cast aluminium frame instead of the iconic steel trellis of the versions that came before it. And while on the one hand I can sympathise with that point of view, ultimately I reckon it was the right decision because they need to keep pace with the performance of other modern nakeds like the incredible KTM 890 Duke-R, and to do that they had to put the Monster on a big diet. It's much closer on paper now to the KTM, and the only thing I didn't love about that bike when I borrowed it last year was the looks. That's not to say they're bad, it's just not to my taste. So with the combination of much improved performance and Ducati's abilities in the styling department, could the Monster offer the best of both worlds? I can't wait to find out. Another Italian beauty comes in the form of Aprilia's sporty middleweight, the RS660. I've been waiting to ride this for absolutely ages, as it was first announced at EICMA in 2019 where I saw it in the flesh and I absolutely loved it. There have been a few reviews and first rides since it was launched to the press at the end of last year, but for us mere YouTubers, it looks like it'll be in dealers in the next couple of months. But however I get hold of one, I really hope I'm not disappointed because it looks like the perfect sports bike for the road on paper. It gets all of the electronics that you'd expect on a more premium superbike, a nice level of spec in terms of suspension and braking, it's pretty lightweight, the riding position looks comfortable but sporty, and with 100 horsepower produced by its 270 parallel twin, I reckon that's around the sweet spot for some decent thrills without getting yourself in trouble. Another bike that's been a long time in the making is Harley's new adventure bike, the Pan America. This was also shown at EICMA in 2019, and we still don't have the full exact specs and pricing, as they're set to be announced on Monday, the 22nd of Feb. So yes, they're taking their time with it, but I still really appreciate that Harley are taking a big gamble and going right the way outside of their lane in terms of both the genre of bike, but also its design. The 1250cc Revolution Max engine at the heart of it is much more modern than their other engines, being liquid-cooled, and the initial specs look pretty good. Power is expected to be competitive with the R1250 GS from BMW, which of course is the benchmark in this category. The looks are certainly divisive, but I'd rather see something distinctive like this than a copy of the Beamer or a KTM. But the question still remains, can a company that's predominantly made cruisers for so long realistically make a competitive adventure bike? Hopefully I'll be able to swing a leg over one this year and find out. Now you could flip that question on its head with the R18. Can the makers of the GS deliver a big cruiser that can mix it with Harley on their own turf? I've been lucky enough to ride the R18 first edition already, and it's certainly a good effort, although perhaps my favourite thing about it is that it doesn't try to be a Harley. It's a pumped up, stretched out boxer, and for me that's way better than making a cheesy tribute of a cruiser. The only thing is, the first edition is pretty bare bones. There's not much in terms of wind protection or technological creature comforts, so you're not realistically going to be doing proper big distances on it. But at the same time, it's super heavy at 345 kilograms, even in this basically naked form. So if you want to do short, sharp blasts, you might be better off with something a little more agile like a Triumph Bobber or Indian Scout. That's why I'm looking forward to the R18 Classic so much. It's equipped with a screen and cruise control, both of which turn it into a bike that suits, for me, the true purpose of a massive 1.8-litre bike like this. They're small tweaks, but I think they'll transform it. It feels like Honda have gone down the same route as well, in that they've built a cruiser that isn't just a knockoff of Harley or Indian, but one that's truly a Honda in its image and technology. It's really quite muted and utilitarian in the same way that the Rebel 500 is. And I like that about it. It's like an anti-cruiser without even the thought of a single tiny bit of chrome. And while the big American twins are fairly traditional in their designs, the 1100 Rebel uses the parallel twin from the Africa twin, albeit with a bit of a retune, and even has the option of a dual clutch transmission, which effectively gives you an automatic cruiser. I loved this engine and gearbox in the Africa Twin Adventure Sports and can't wait to find out how it translates to the cruiser format. Now, not many bikes are getting a massive power boost at the moment, with Euro 5 emissions regulations taking widespread effect at the beginning of this year. That's forced manufacturers to update their engines primarily to run cleaner. But there are a few exceptions, and the Moto Guzzi V7 is one of them. I loved this bike when I rode it a couple of years back, but it has to be said, versus other retros, its longitudinally mounted 744cc V-twin was starting to look a little underpowered. Then, Moto Guzzi made the V85 TT adventure bike with a bigger, more powerful version of basically the same engine, and it only had to be a matter of time before it made its way down into their road-focused bikes. Both the V9 and the V7 received the 853cc twin, and although they don't get the full 80 horsepower of the V85, 65 horsepower peak is still a big increase over the 50-ish of the previous V7. It's a fairly light bike compared to something like the Triumph Street Twin, and now way more powerful than the 47 horsepower Royal Enfield Interceptor, so I reckon it'll make for one of the best, if not the best, mid-capacity retros on the market. That said, Triumph have teased an update to the Bonneville lineup this week, with the full announcement due on the 23rd of Feb. I'll be heading up to the factory to see them in the flesh beforehand, so obviously if you want to see that video as soon as it goes live, then do subscribe if you're not already. It's a super short teaser video, but you can see a new Street Twin with some new hardware visible, a Bobber, Speedmaster, and the T100 and T120 must be in there too. Now, I'm not expecting a massive revolution for this year, probably just some incremental tweaks and Euro 5 compliance. But as a Street Twin owner and a big fan of this line of bikes, I hope they surprise me, and either way, I'll certainly enjoy taking them for a spin to see how they compare to my own trusty first-gen bike. Also from Triumph, another bike that bucks the Euro 5 trend with a big power boost is the Speed Triple 1200 RS, which went from just under 150 horsepower to 180, which almost puts it in the super naked category. At the same time, they've managed to shed 10 kilograms and move the mass lower with a new underslung exhaust. And of course, it retains the top-notch brakes, suspension, and electronics of the previous generation, with even a couple of enhancements like a new dash and keyless filler cap. Honestly, I think it'll be one of those bikes that's far more capable than I am by quite a significant margin, especially on the road, but that's still not going to stop me. It looks incredible, it sounds great even with the stock pipe, and it ought to be absolutely rapid, so I'd be mad to pass it up. But I have to say, the bike that I've been looking forward to the most is the new Ducati Multistrada V4. I'm absolutely desperate to get my hands on one. Yes, it's the most powerful bike on the adventure market now, and it has the specs, chassis, and equipment to match, but it's also super high-tech. And whether it's this bike, the KTM Super Adventure, or the BMW R1250 RT, I just have to test out adaptive cruise control on a bike sometime soon. I've always thought it was an incredibly useful feature when I've used it in cars, so I want to know how it translates to two wheels and whether it can truly ease the monotony of those longer motorway stints. The other two bikes look decent, but the Ducati has the most comprehensive system with a rear-facing radar that does blind spot detection as well, and besides, it's red and it's a Ducati. And that's why it rounds off the bikes I'm most looking forward to riding this year. I can't wait to get stuck in over the next couple of months, but as always, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Which of these bikes would you like to see on the channel? And if there are any I've missed, I'll certainly add them to my list. And of course, if you're new here and you want to see more videos like this, hit subscribe and I'll catch you next time.